Hi all, and welcome to a new session of Global Angular Meetup. I'm gonna be your host today. My name is Daniel Marin. I'm part of this Labs team, and I just want you to remind all that this event is presented to you by this Media and Angular MTB Meetup. And well, our sponsor, as usual, is this Labs. This Labs is your partners in more digital transformation, and we specialize in mentorship, consulting, training, staff augmentation, and much more. Find out more about us and the services we offer at this.labs in Twitter or at this.labs.com. Before we continue, I want to make a few announcements. We have an event coming soon, and Global GraphQL Meetup for all of you that love GraphQL on October 6th. And then we have a Global React Meetup on October 9th, and then a Global Vue Meetup on October 15th. And as you can see, we have events in several topics, modern JavaScript related. And if you're interested, you can find out more information about it in this.media or Twitter, and find out about events, podcasts, articles, and all the cool things we're doing. And for you, we have some really awesome speakers today. We've been having so much fun, just like waiting for you to start. So I hope you have as much fun as we've been having. And well, we have for you today Mark Thompson. He's a developer advocate at Google, and he's in the Angular team. And we got Brennan. She's the Angular GDE and founder of Angular Nation.net. And for schedule today, well, I'm gonna stop bothering you with a welcoming. I'm gonna leave it up to our awesome speakers. We're gonna have Mark Thompson first. He's gonna talk about Angular and the supercharged CLI, and then Bonnie's gonna talk about dynamic Angular architecture. So I'm gonna stop talking now. I'm gonna leave it up to you, Mark. I'm gonna take Bonnie and me out of this stage so you can have it all for yourself. And good luck, man.
All right, thank you so much. Let's go.
Let's do this, man.
All right.
There you go. Good luck, man.
Thank you. All right, friends, thank you so much for coming today. I am so pumped up. If you're out there watching right now, here's what I want you to do. When you get that left hand up right now, where you are, you see this? That's me giving you a high five. Thanks for being awesome for coming today. Today's session is entitled Angular and the Supercharged CLI. I want to give a huge thank out to this.media and this.labs for having me today. You folks are phenomenal, and I am pumped up to be here. So my name is Mark. I work on the Angular team. I'm a developer advocate over at Google. If you want to know something about me, I love to code and teach. Those two things are my absolute jam. But I'll tell you, if this Google thing doesn't work out, my dream job is to be a hand model. All right. I want to tell you a story today, and the story starts here. So this is my kid, the heir. Well, I call him the heir because he's the heir to the Thompson billion-dollar fortune that is not quite there yet, but it's in progress. And the heir came up to me and said, "Hey, Dad, can you make a cool app for finding friends?" Now, he's only 3 years old, but he wants to find friends with a really cool app. And I thought to myself, what can I do? How can I make something for him? I said, well, let's try it with an app called Kindle. So I came up with this idea for an app called Kindle, which is a brand new friending app. And we're going to build this entire thing with Angular. Now, if you look at an app like this, so let's go back and look at the UI. There are quite a few things going on here. So how would you approach something like this? Well, you would approach it with the power of components. So if you're new to Angular, components are our basic foundational UI element that you use when you're building your user interfaces. And here's what components are made up of. You got TypeScript, CSS, and then HTML. So you need these three building blocks to build a component. Now, with that knowledge in mind, let's start thinking about what it will take to make this application. Well, if I'm looking, I probably need some type of outward container element. Then I see two things. I see a friends list, then I see a messages list. Inside both of those, I see, well, it looks like I could probably isolate the code or separate the code for an individual friend. And then I could do the same thing for a message, right? So I can do those things. I think this is a good way to block out our application, and we can create the components to make this happen. Now, to get into this, we're going to take advantage of the supercharged CLI, which you might say, well, Mark, what is a CLI? Well, a CLI is a command line interface. What that does for you is it's a tool that works in your computer's terminal, and you can issue commands and actions to do things on your computer in your project. These are incredibly popular. Some of your favorite tools have CLIs, or command line interfaces. This is so popular, GitHub just released their 1.0 of their command line interface. So CLIs are all the rage these days. For us to get started, here's what we'll need to do. We need to install the CLI. And the way to do that is you run npm install. We do -g, right? And -g is for global. And we say install it from this location at Angular CLI. G for global just means that we can run this command from anywhere on our computer, which is going to be really helpful for you as you're doing different projects in different spaces. Once you've installed the CLI, you get access to the ng tool, which is the CLI, and then it takes the parameter of the command that you want to do. Where does ng come from? Well, that's just an old Angular convention, like ANG from Angular, or you short it to ng, and that's where you get your ng. So we say ng plus the command that we want to run. So if you want to create your app, here's the first part of the supercharged CLI that we're going to use. We do ng new, and then the name of our app, Kindler app. Let me show you what you're going to get. So when you run that command, you get this amount of code already created for you. We have our app folder where all of our stuff lives. Then we have our assets, some global styles, etc. So that's where we start off. That's pretty good. I like that. But we can take this a step further. There's another command that's really helpful that we can use. We're going to do ng serve. Now, what this does is this launches our built-in web server for development. So your development web server. That'll let you have the flexibility of writing your code, and then because there's a hot refresh there, it's going to refresh the web server every time you save your code. It's going to build everything up, make sure that we have all of our parts working, then it's going to make it available on our web server. All right, we're almost there. Then as you can see, Angular Live Development Server is listening on localhost 4200. So this server runs by default on port 4200. Let's go there and have a look. So this is it. I hit refresh. Okay, now our application is running. Now this is really exciting because this is all the code that comes by default that helps you to get started while you're learning Angular. But we don't need this code because we have an app to build. Okay, let's go back and start our roadmap to building this application. First up, we need to build our parent application, like our main container component. So let's build that part. So I'm going to go back here. Then I'm going to open this up. Here's our default code. So all of this can go away. And I'm going to put what I know everybody wants to see. This is what you've been waiting for as a developer. You know this is your jam. All right, hello world. So without refreshing, we see the updates. We're on the right track. This feels really good. Now that we have that set up, I'm going to install some styles that will just make our life a little bit easier. So I already have some styles that I want to use, just a CSS reset. So then that way we get a little bit more consistent formatting. I've just overridden the browser styles. Okay, with that being said, let's go back to our component. Now, oh, and just let everyone know what I'm using. Today I'm using VS Code to run our demo and to edit our code. Okay, this is just Zen mode to keep the distractions down. If I'm going to build this thing out, I probably start with a section, and then I might have something like an H1 that says, or we have a header, something that says Kindler, and then we'll toss in a nice emoji. Feels good. Okay, our emoji shows up. Now let me throw in our template for this that I've already built. So just to save us some time, I've already built out a template with everything set up. Let me add some styles that I know I'll need for our application. So I'm going to add in my styles by default. Okay, these are just some styles we're going to use. Now we have our parent application, our parent component, excuse me. We have it set up there, and we have our Kindler title looking nice and crispy. This looks amazing. My energy is going up by the second. All right, we got that going. Now let's work on the friends list component. Okay, let's work on this friends list component. All right, so let me go back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this folder, and I'm going to start doing a new folder. Maybe call it friends list. And then inside this folder, I need to create my 3 files. So I'll need like friends list dot component dot ts. Then I got to do that again. Okay, that feels really bad already. That already feels bad because one, what if I misspell something or forget to type a file? I don't want to do that. I think there's a better way, and let me show you that better way. So I'm going to delete that file, that folder, and let me show you a better way to do this. Remember I told you the CLI is helpful for us to do tasks on our computer. Well, I'm going to say ng, then I want to do generate. Now, generate is one of the commands that I can use with the supercharged CLI. Generate, and then I want a component called friends list. I'm going to do component, we'll do friends list. Let's go. Now, you see what happened for me automatically. I got my friends list folder. Then I got the component CSS, the component HTML, the component TypeScript. And as a bonus to keep this party going, I even got the test file. So if I go back and I want to include it, I'm going to now include this file. Okay, so we're going to include this right now. Okay. If you notice, I did something and it was very subtle but important. Look what I did. I just uncommented this line right in front of you. And then because of the integration that Angular is going to have with this IDE and the Angular language service plugin, it knew that the friends list existed again. So if you go back, we got friends list works. Now, this is the default stuff that shows up when you generate a new component, but this is what you're going to do anyway. You're going to type this thing works so you can know that it's living. All right, awesome. That is super great. So let's go into our friends list. I'm going to go to the definition here. Now, this is our component class, and I'm going to jump in right here, and we need a list of friends. I think that's the right way to do this. Because it's called the friends list, well, let's have our data to support our friends. So to do that, I have an array of friends. And this array is an array with an object literal and an object literal. We have 2 properties. We have name and photo. And what I want to do is I want to go into the HTML associated with this component. Okay, here's where it says friends list works. What I probably do here is do a section. And then I just want to say, I want to list this thing out. So let me do a UL. Or we'll do a diff just for now. Okay, and then I want to do an ng4, which is a way for us to do like a for loop inside of a template. We got a friend of friends. Okay, very fun. So I got friend of friends, and for each friend, here's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to use our interpolation and do friend.name. Okay, so this is interpolation into our template. So it's going to see those double curlies. That's going to make this thing display on the screen. Let's see if we did it right. Okay, everything is going pretty great so far. We have Jamal, Angie, Wesley, and Denny. This is awesome. But that doesn't match what we have here. Well, because what you probably need is a friend component, right? So we probably need to get our friend component into the picture. So let's do that. Now I'm going to change this to be my template for this. Okay, so now I need to create this component called app_friend. So let's do that. So I'll do ng generate component, and then I'll just do friend. Now watch what happens. It's going to create my files, and then immediately the template's going to know that our friend component actually exists. But it's going to be expecting something. Now this is our template binding syntax. Okay, and that looks a little interesting, but all I'm doing here is that I want to say, hey, for this @friend component, I want to be able to send in a value And I want that value to be one of the friends from the list. So let's jump in there. I'm going to go right to the definition. So I'm control clicking on Mac, but on PC, you do a right click, and then you can see that little menu. That's how I'm doing that. We'll just set up an input, because remember, I want to say, hey, component, here is a friend for you to display. Right, here's how we'll do that. We're going to bring in an annotation, okay, which is going to allow us to add some additional functionality to our class. We call it input, and then I'm going to call it friend, because it has to match what we had on our other template, the way we used it. So I'm going to go into the HTML here for this friend, and just for fun, make sure that everything is still working. We'll say friend dot, oh, I think we can do friend dot name here. Okay, and then we'll save it. If you go back, okay, make sure it's saved, and then let's see if there are any errors that pop up on our console, because I might have typed something wrong. Okay, everything looks good so far, but our friends list seems to not be showing our friend. That's okay. Let's fix up our template to make sure that we have everything the right way. So I'm gonna go back to my friends list, make sure that that looks good. So that feels good so far. We can pass in our friend. Let me make sure I have all my styles set up as well. So I'm going to go to my friends list CSS. I'm going to add in my styles here. Okay, that feels good. There they are. They were just hidden. They were off the screen. There you go. So they're there. Now, let's go back to the friend component. So I'm going to go back one level, and we'll go to our friend component. Now, you know we want more than just a friend name. So let's actually create that. So I have some template here that I've already created to shorten the sequence. I have my article. I have my style for the background image. So I'm doing some style binding here just to put some styles in here to make our thing look nice. And then I just want to display the friend name. But if we go into our class, I have a little style here that I'm going to add in as well. So I added my friend style. All right. We go back. Look at what we got. Remember, I asked you earlier, get that hand up. Come on, one more time. Get that hand up. High five. You're doing great. I believe in you. Okay, so now we have our friends list completed, and the Angular CLI has been instrumental in saving us time here. Okay, now we need to follow the same process for what? The message list. So let's go through this. But now that we know what to do, we're going to create what? Our message list, then our individual messages. And then we'll be good to go. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to the CLI. Okay, so I'm going to create a component called messages, message list. All right, to incorporate this, well, that's working. To incorporate this, we need to go back to our component here. So remember we have this. Okay, see, I named this incorrectly. We're going to have to fix that because it won't recognize it because I put message list, not messages list. So the short way to fix that is to go back here and just generate this again. Or I could change it in my template there, but I'll just go back and fix it here. Okay, now we're good to go. So now if we save this, all right, message list is working. So we know what goes there. So let's go into message list. And from here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to want to say, well, let's have some messages. So I have some messages, and it's an array of object literals with from, to, photo, text, read, and online. All right. Very fun. Inside the template here, I'm going to go to the template. Let's just jump in and have the messages list template here. Okay. I have a section with an H1, and then inside I'm going to be doing my messages. So you know what we need to do here? If you said create another component at home, you are right, and your prize is to be here with me today, and I'm so grateful for you. All right, so now let's create our message component. Now, if it seems like I'm going fast on creating these components, well, that's really more of a function of the supercharged CLI that is making it not a big deal. So as I'm saving this, then we're going to go and configure our message. Okay, we got to configure our message component. So let's go to the definition here. All right, we have to send in a message. So let's do that. We do input. Let's go. We bring in this input and we just say, yeah, we're going to bring in a message. Okay, very fun. Very fun. Let's go. So if we look at our message, you see it's saying that message works because we haven't changed that interior HTML for that component. Let's do that now. So if we go into this message component, we go in, we're going to change this, and I already have some pre-created message template just to make our lives easier. Let's go. Look at this. So we have our individual element. We can call it an article here. And then we have some binding for the photo. So this is going to say, hey, find the element property of image. I mean, the source property of image. And then here's what I want you to use for the value there. Very cool. Same thing for our alt message. And let's see what this shows up as on the screen. But before we do that, we got to make sure we have our styles here because this one has some styles too. Okay, we got our message styles. There you go. Now we've built this app together right now using the supercharged CLI. Yeah, there were some styles and things that I pre-created, but that's because you didn't want to see me searching Stack Overflow on how to do stuff. But the idea is that we were creating all of these components one by one to compose them into a bigger application. But you might ask yourself, you know, I've done Angular before and I've created components, but what happened to all the module stuff and all the modules? Well, let's see what happened to the module, to the app module. Well, here's where the CLI is really going to be helping you. As I was creating my components, the CLI was adding them, it was importing them to the module, and then it was adding them to the declarations array. So that way we had it to be able to work with immediately, and it wasn't slowing down our developer velocity because I never had to come into this file to make any changes. That saves a lot of time. I don't know about you, but I've written code in other tools where I forgot to include it someplace, and then I couldn't figure out what I did wrong, and I spent a lot of time. Well, at least this feature is saving me that effort. Okay, now we have everything working in our favor. But I think there's a little bit more. I think there's one more thing. All right, I think what we can do is deploy this application. So let's go to deployment. So first thing I need to do is do an ng add. So another CLI command is ng add. So we're going to ng add and do @Angular/Fire. So this is going to give us Firebase integration. How fun is that? So while this is doing, let me explain what's happening. Right now, I'm going to be deploying using Firebase, but that's not even your only option. We have a package for Firebase, but there are also packages that allow you to deploy with GitHub, AWS, Heroku, and other platforms. If it doesn't exist, but you can create it because the CLI is extensible and there's more that you can do. All right, so now we're installing our packages. This will be done in a second, and then we're going to get our application deployed to the internet. All right, so our packages are installed. It's going to ask me, where do I want to put this? One step you would have had to have done to make this work is create an application in a project in your Firebase. But once you've done that already, I'm going to do this. ng deploy in this. Bow. I'm going to do a little dab for y'all. You know why? Because the ng deploy is going to take care of two things for me, at least. It's going to take care of compiling and making my production build, and it's going to take care of the actual deployment so I don't have to do that step myself. And once this is ready, we're going to go ahead and get our command to be able to see it deployed. So it's running optimizations, deploying. You can see it happening. And now this is a real URL that anybody can go to see this application. So I'm going to copy this just so you know that it's real. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back here, open a new tab. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to paste it in there. Okay, I'm going to have to come out of full screen for this just so you can see it. Okay, I'm just going to do that so I can drop it in there. Okay, and this is our actual deployed application on the internet. You can do this. So I'm going to put it put this URL in the chat as well in case somebody wants to try it. So this actually works. And there you go. So let's look at the power tools that we use today. We have ng new. This helps us to kick off our project. It's the bootstrapping step. Then we had ng serve. The ng serve allowed us to run our local web development server that gave us the opportunity to just see our changes and see our hosted changes locally. Then we had ng generate. This one was doing a lot of the workhorse stuff for us. It was creating our components every time we did the ng generate. And then it was doing a lot of linking up. So we were doing a lot of stuff with that one. And then finally, just for fun, we did the ng deploy. And if you saw, I didn't do any special configuration outside of making sure I had that project existing and then selecting it and typing ng deploy. And then we had a real application running on a real server outside of my local machine. How fun was that? But this isn't where the party stops. So that's part of the reason I call this the supercharged CLI, but these are some more of the reasons why I call it the supercharged CLI. You can do things like doc search from the command line. You could do updates. You could build. You can run an app shell. You can have testing, PWAs, server-side rendering, linting, and so much more. This CLI is so powerful, and I hope that you can do something with it. And so you might ask yourself, well, Mark, what do I do from here? Where do I go from here? Well, go build some great apps. Okay, friends, thank you so much.
Well, Mark, that was awesome. You killed it. I just bring Bonnie. I'm sure she thinks the same. I mean, I gave talks about the CLI and you just blow my mind. And I think that I really need to adjust mine for the future. I think that it was really cool. And really, thank you for your time. It was really awesome. I hope everyone enjoyed as much as I did. And
thank you.
I didn't see any questions. I see someone mentioned a question here about if you want to answer it, you can just let me know. I can bring it in. Can you see the comments?
Oh, I was looking at the wrong side. Okay. Let's see. Okay, what question?
So I see one about don't you need to sanitize image URL? I see this one.
Oh, sanitize the image URL in case somebody put something bad there. Is that what the thought is? I mean, you can if you want. I chose these URLs because they're hosted files someplace, right? So I chose them. But if you want to take further security precautions, definitely you can do that.
And there's another one here. I think this is another question. So basically, I want all JS files in a child folder in output path. How can I do it using CLI?
Oh, really great question. So I know there's configuration that you can do with the CLI. I don't know what that one is right offhand, but ping me on Twitter so I can keep up with this question, and then I'll help explore it with you.
And if you go to the CLI docs, it's really great because when all of these, the CLI docs are very good and they have a lot of flags. So when you run these CLI, so Mark showed a lot of basic CLI commands, and then there's a bunch more. So when you run these CLI commands, and especially the generate commands, there's a whole bunch of flags. I can never remember all the flags, so I pretty much always have to go look them up. But the docs are very good. So I would actually, for that question about the child folder, I would also check the docs too. But if you don't find it, let us know because we can also, well, Mark can.
Yeah, I use a lot the old Angular console, which is now the NX console, I believe. So that helps me a lot because I always forget the attributes. So that way you have selectors and stuff. I don't know, for all those that are visual like me, that was really, really, really helpful in order to like actually see everything in like the bigger picture. So I think we're taking time from Bonnie. So Bonnie, it's your time now. So come ahead, share your screen so I can.
I don't know if I want to follow that, man, but I just love your energy, Mark, because you're just having so much fun and it just makes the rest of us excited because you're excited and just contagious, you know? So I love it. So, but that's okay because I'm actually really excited about what I'm showing too, because that was CLI stuff and I'm going to just kind of dive into more architecture. And so this will be good. It'll be fun. Okay. So this is actually something that I want to show you guys. Can you see my screen? Yeah. I want to show you something that I actually wrote for a client a couple of years ago. And then I just ended up pulling this again and over again for several clients because I just kept seeing people that were doing this. And so I want to show you the code and I want to just kind of show you an example of what I mean when I say that I see this over and over again. So this is probably really big. Let me make it a little smaller here. Oh, maybe that's too small. Okay, so if we look at this, this is super typical. This is just a demo. Like I said, this shows you a dynamic, it's a reactive form with some typical form fields, right? This is just, I just made this up to show you, so it's not real. First name, last name. There's a couple of input fields here and a couple of drop downs here. And again, I just made this stuff up, right? So it's just nonsense. But if we look at the code, this is pretty typical, and I see stuff like this a lot. Different people use different, this is, I love Angular material, so I used Angular material for this demo, but it doesn't have to be Angular material, right? But this is just typical reactive forms with Angular material. You see the form control names here. There's a form group, and these are, material inputs. Here's a couple of inputs. Here's a couple of select with drop downs. And by the way, this whole repo is going to be, I'll make it available. I'll send it to Daniel and he can put a link in the chat. So you guys can see all this code. So don't worry about that. Okay, so let me open up the TypeScript right next to it. And you can just see real quick that this is the code that goes with the HTML, right? We got the same form control names here. Okay, so again, this is pretty typical, right? And I see a lot of teams writing code like this. And this code works fine. So I want you to look at this for a minute. And if you can, put a note in the chat, because I can see the chat right now. And tell me if you know what's wrong with this code. Because, the code works, right? But what's wrong with it? Do you guys know? Okay, so, and I know we have like a minute delay, so I'm assuming that you guys have some good guesses, but I'm just going to move on. So the problem here is that even though this code works just fine, it's not dry, right? And so dry means don't repeat yourself. So when we write this code, we just want to really, we've got the map form fields in here over and over again. And so it would be great to make it dry, but the problem is that they're not all input form fields. So it gets a little bit harder to iterate through things. And especially when we've got this dynamic form field functionality, there's a lot of, I know Deborah Carrata has an amazing reactive forms on Pluralsight that I loved, right? I learned a lot from that. But when we start diving into more dynamic stuff, then it gets a little bit complicated. And then we go away from all of the tutorials and the docs, and we have to kind of write a little bit more dynamic stuff. So that's really what I want to talk to you about. Okay, so we've got this form field, right? And like I said, this is super typical, and I see this kind of stuff a lot, but it's just not dry. So how do we go about? So the first thing I want to show you is, let's go, I want to peek into the first step, and I'm going to open this over to the side here. Okay, so this is just the first step, right? What I want to do is I want to take an array. I want to create an array. So here, see, I've got the first name, last name, favorite food. And so I'm just doing this here. I'm making an array of form fields, right? And I'm going to show you, actually, here, I'll go ahead and pull that up now. So we've got this array over here that matches this, right? Because what I want to do really is, in order to make something dynamic, and really what I look for where I want the dynamic components to be is when I see a lot of code that's just not exactly dry, right? That's where I see that I have an opportunity for a dynamic form. And yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to talk about this in a minute. But first, I want to go to the demo without, I want to show you the model. Okay, so I'm going to dive in a little bit to show you what the reactive form is going to look like. And we're going to start real simple with the model. This is like the first, where is it? It is the model. Here it is. No, I want it over here. Okay, that's fine. So the first thing that I want to do is, let me close this out, right? And just focus on this for a minute. So I'm going to make an enum. And this is all the different field types that I have defined here. The one that we're using for the demo is just, I think, what was it? The text field and the select dropdown. And then we've got the field. So this is all the possible fields. And I kind of extended this as I went through, right? But the only ones that we need here are the name and the type. And one of the things that I want to mention when we're talking about architecture is that you always want to keep it as simple as you possibly can. And one thing that I see a lot of teams doing is making a lot of different interfaces that are very similar. And so what I did to avoid that was I made all of these optional. So if you use something like this, and like I said, this is available on GitHub and it's public, and I'm going to share this code with you. And encourage you to go and plagiarize this all you want and use this for yourself. And the thing about these is these are optional because you might not be needing them, right? So if you go and look at this code and you use some of it, you don't want to necessarily pull in all of it, just pull in what you need, right? Okay, so, and I don't have time to really go into too much detail, but the other thing that I want to mention here is the key value pair. A key value pair is not something that's specific to Angular, but it's really something that I've found useful in so many different situations, because you can just iterate through an array of key value pairs. Super helpful. Anyway, so I want to show you where the magic happens in this dynamic form. And we're going to start, is this the one? Yes. Okay. So I like to show you this because I think this is really what allows people to visualize what's going on here, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen the ng switch case. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like ng if this, right? So if you've got this switch up here on the field type, and remember we looked at that enum with the field types, and here are the field types. There's a checkbox, there's a date picker, and a single radio. So basically what happens is it looks at the field type, right? And it shows one of these. So this, and I just want to mention the switch case is not actually the fastest way to do this in Angular. There's another one that's a little bit better for performance, and it's called the component factory resolver. The reason why I'm using the ng switch case in this is because for these purposes, like I'm probably not ever going to have more than maybe 24 form fields at a time on a page, right? If I was going to have several hundred, then I would go ahead and use the component factory resolver. But since I'm not going to show more than maybe 24 at the very most, then this is going to be fine. And I also think the switch case is nice for teaching purposes because it's very easy to visualize here what's going on, right? But I also want you to know if you're doing something where performance might be an issue, then I want you to know that the component factory resolver is out there so that you can it's the same thing, but it's in the TypeScript, right? Anyway, so we've got the switch case here. And this, like I said, is where I like to show this because if you look at this code, I mean, other than the switch case, inside here, this is not complicated at all. It's the same. It's the Angular material form fields, right? And we've just got one for each. And again, I thought I actually was planning to release this little kind of set of code as an NPM library because I thought it would be super helpful for other developers. And I have actually used it for a lot of clients and they love it. And I've shown it to a lot of other developers and they love it. So I was planning to use it to release it as an NPM library. But if you look at this, first of all, it's not that much code. And also, what if your team's not using Angular material? What if you're using PrimeNG or Kendo or your own CSS, right? So the reason why I didn't want to release this as a library, and I'm going to show you kind of the more, the rest of it here in a minute, but I didn't want to release this as a library because I want to use this for teaching because you don't need to have another dependency in your app in order to have this. It's not that much code. And like I said, it's free. You can use it. But as you're going through it, and if you do decide to use something like this, I just want you to remember, like this is meant as a sample for teaching because it doesn't have to be reactive forms. It doesn't have to be Angular material. We might be using something like this for pop-ups, for dynamic pop-ups, or for charts. If you have a lot of charts, if you have a lot of notifications, right? It doesn't have to be. This is just an example. So I don't want you to get too much into the dynamic reactive form. I want you to just think about, whatever you see in your app that's not as dry as you'd like it to be, and just think about how this process works, right? So first we looked at the array of constants, and then we looked at the interface, and now we look at the switch case. Let's go to this dynamic field. Okay, so actually what I want to do, I want to talk about this because it's very cool, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute because it doesn't really look like there's anything going on here, but it's actually really cool. Okay, so here, and I need to put that back in. I commented out the errors when I updated it to Angular 10, and I need to put that back in. The error messages were working fine, but I just didn't have time to mess with it. That's Todd Motto's NGX errors, which is really nice. Anyway, so what I want to show you on here is we've got this let field of field set, right? This is what we're passing in the field of field set. And then we're just iterating through this. This is the field that I just showed you with the switch case. So for each field in the field set, it's only going to show one of those form fields, right? And then I want to go into here and show you. And so I want you to notice one thing about this file. It's full of comments. And the reason why is because I don't want to worry too much about going through like all of this. I just want to hit the basics and tell you what this file does. But I want you to be able to go through this because, again, I work with a lot of junior developers. And so I really like for my code, even though sometimes it might be doing some complicated stuff, I don't really want it to look complicated. So my hope is that if you actually scroll down here slowly, that you're going to be able to understand this, right? So I'm going to go through it kind of quickly. But again, nothing in here is super complicated. It's just a little bit of code and a lot of comments. Okay, so first what we're doing here, we've got a field set, right? And I'm not really gonna spend a lot of time on errors or the default data, but mainly it's just the field set. We're passing in an array of fields, and then we're gonna emit the fields back to the parent. I have to do this because if you've ever done reactive forms, you know that if you try to load the page and you don't have everything defined, then it's immediately going to throw an error. So anyway, so on the ng on init, what we're going to do is initialize the form, right? And then we're basically going to iterate through that array of form fields. And for each one, we're going to check and see if it has validation or a default value or anything like that, and just do a little bit of handling. But other than that, so we're doing, and again, this is pretty basic code. There's a form builder group, right? And then a field set dot for each. We're going to go through each field, and then we're going to use, this is a reactive forms dot add control, right? So again, this is not too simple. Basically what we're doing, and this is the thing, right, is I don't want this to be complicated or intimidating, because basically I'm just iterating through an array of fields, right? And so if I just kind of try to keep it simple, and within that, your functions can get kind of complicated as you got to have this and you got to have that. The client wants this and that. But if we just keep going back to the simplest thing, right, what we're doing when we make dynamic forms, or at least this is a pattern that I've used a lot, and it's just super simple because I try to pull anything that's hard coded in there, right? Usually this function is similar to this function, except for one or two things that are hard coded. That's what we want to extract out. So sometimes, and this is, I just want to step away from the code for a minute and say, sometimes when we get away from the basics and we start getting into more dynamic things, when we go, let me go back to this because I just really want to make a point here. This works fine, right? This is Angular and it works, and it's Angular modules. But if you're writing code like this, you're not really benefiting from the beauty of Angular, because Angular is really good at doing dynamic stuff like this. And it's real, it's beautiful, right? So if you get used to that and start using that, you can do amazing, cool things with Angular. And sometimes the problem, and I've heard this a lot from developers, that they get to a certain point with Angular, once you get past the beginner stuff and you start doing more advanced stuff, you kind of fall off this cliff with the tutorials, right? Where the tutorials don't cover so much of this dynamic stuff. And so if you're at that point where you're trying to do something and you're struggling with these tutorials, please participate in the community, ask questions, and start, talking to other people, because there's a lot of people out there who are doing the same things. And these are super, super interesting conversations to have. And also I would mention, reach out to the GDEs, because that's what GDEs are there for, to help. And the Angular team, there's so many. Mark, the guy that just talked before me, is super fun. And they have people like that to help. So there are a lot of people in the community. Anyway, I digress. Let me go back in here. Where was I? I was not here. So I was going through this. Let me find this again. This, like I said, initialize form. And then there's another function below it that just does initialize form control. So we're going to iterate through the array, and then each form control is going to go through here. And we're just going to, check for default values and check for some other functionality. We have, I had a client that wanted a conditional field with toggles off and on. So it does that. And again, there's comments in here, and I don't want to go through all of this because I don't have enough time, but I want to scroll down to the bottom and show you, this is just fun, handle slide toggle children, but that's not what I want to show you. What I want to show you is this. So right before I leave this because remember I made this dynamic reactive form module, right? So this is a shared thing that I can use, and I've actually used this chunk right here. I've used this part for many different clients, and the part above it is just a demo for you guys to see how it works together. But the thing with this is, I can take this and I can put it anywhere I want. Once I get the dynamic form, right, and I get whatever I want from the user, and then I go back to my parent, and there's a lot of functionality with the reactive forms that I don't need anymore. I don't need to worry about the error handling, validation, all that kind of stuff. So the last thing that I'm going to do is go through this extract form values. And I actually messed this up a couple times and made infinite loops like 3 times when I was writing this. But basically what it does is it iterates through the reactive forms, right? And then it just gives you, remember what I said earlier, a key value array. A key value pair array is just super simple. Each one has a key and a value. And then we're going to take this back up to the parent. And that just lets it, because I want to leave all the reactive forms here. I don't need that anymore. But before I do, there's one more thing. Remember I said I want to show you. I'm running out of time here. And again, all this code is available on GitHub and I'll share it with you. But there's one more thing that I wanted to show you here. And I kind of want to talk through this a little bit. So remember here, we have this. This is where the magic happens, right? This is a switch case and this is pretty simple stuff. And then I showed you this. And this is the TypeScript that goes along with that. And it looks like there's nothing going on here. But remember, okay, so let's go back to this. Remember I had that error handling, and the error handling was working. I just commented it out because I updated it. But when I was, and this is the thing, a lot of us that are using reactive forms are using error handling. The validation is really nice with reactive forms. And this little library with Todd Motto is also really nice. So when we want to use this validation, what I started doing when I put the error handling in was I found that I needed dirty, checked, pristine, touch. Like I need to have all these values so that I can know whether or not to show my errors, right? And what I was doing was I was going into the dynamic field in here and I had to pass them back up to the parent, which is the dynamic form. And so just passing from the child to the parent within this dynamic module here, I was just making a lot. Like I have to make one for dirty and I have to make one for checked, and then I have to, man, there's all these Booleans that I'm passing. And I was like, it just, this little file here was getting bigger and bigger because I had all these inputs, and then I have to have emits, and I'm writing more and more code. And I was just like, I really didn't like it. And so this is just one last thing that I want to say. And I'm not going to, I can't say like all of how, right? But I just want you to think about this when you're using Angular. And it's kind of silly because I work with my daughter a lot and she's very visual, right? So I want you to picture like a silly little guy peeking out from your component and looking around at the page, right? And I know this is silly, but go with me here because there's a point to this. So even when we were just using jQuery, there you can get an tag by ID, you can get a tag by class, you can get a tag by type, and there's all these things that you can do to get the element and look at it, right? And Angular gives you like way more power to do this. There's view child queries. There's all kinds of like things that you can do with Angular if you know to go look for it, right? And for a long time, I didn't know to go look for it. But what I thought about was if I'm in my component, from this component, especially when I have the power of Angular behind me, I can like peek out from my component and spy on anything else on the page. It doesn't even have to be an Angular component, right? I can see whatever I want to see from anywhere if I know what to do. And so I was really thinking about like, there's got to be a better way. So I went searching, and this is where, like, I want to come back to this little thing here, the form group directive that I had never really paid attention to. It's like the redheaded stepchild. And I didn't really see it talked about a whole lot. But what happens was when I put this in, then I just pass this little thing, this dot control, get this as form control. So this one line of code, which was like some obscure little thing that I had never seen it before, allowed me to remove like this file. I had gotten up to like 50 lines of I was just passing all kinds. I'm exaggerating, right? But there was between the event emitters and the inputs, like it was a lot. So, the point that I'm making is not necessarily about this specific form control directive, but what I see so much in consulting over the years is that the difference, and it seems weird, right? But the difference between the people who have a lot of experience with Angular and the people who are kind of using Angular over and over and learning it as they go along is that a lot of people who are not so familiar with Angular are writing way more code. And then the ones who have been doing it for a while and the ones who learn and are experts are writing less code. So one of the things that I really, really, really want you to take away from this is if you're writing it and you just feel like you're writing more and more code, sometimes it's almost always worth it to stop and go look through the docs and just kind of find a better way or find an example, or ask for help. So I really always encourage people to reach out to me, ask for help, reach out to any of the GDEs. And I think I'm out of time, but I just want to mention one more thing. I'm just take off my, did I show you everything? Oh, no. I almost forgot one more thing that I have to show you. This is the coolest part. And I almost turned off my screen share without showing you the coolest. I get very excited about the form control directive. But the other thing I want to show you, okay, I want to show you this one more time and open up this to the side. This is where we started, right? And now I want to show you what this exact same component, this looks the same in the before and after, so that's not even worry about. I want to show you what this code looks like after we've implemented, because that's really where it's cool, right? So this is the demo without the dynamic form. So we'll close that, and then we start with the demo with, see, I get excited, I talk too fast. Okay, so remember, let's close this. This is what it looked like before. And then here we have the form constants. This is where we pulled it all out. This is where you would go if you want to add anything or change anything. And it's super easy because there's nothing in this file except the constants. And so all the business logic is pulled away. Now that I have this dynamic form written, look at the file now. And then look at this. This is what it looks like. All we're doing is we're passing in that array. Remember, the array was the form fields. So we get that left form and right form. The reason why I kept it left form and right form is because I don't want to put any, and a lot of people say, there are so many things that you could do to expand this, and there's so many edge cases, right? And one of the obvious things that I've seen over and over again that you guys are probably doing too is when you're using forms, you have maybe different, headers, or you have different style elements on the page. And so the reason why I really didn't want to worry too much about this in the dynamic part. And so I didn't put any kind of padding or anything around it because it's meant to style around it, right? This is just handling all the reactive form logic for you. And I think that this is really nice. So, one more thing, I want to bring it up because I have this right here, and I'm going to go. That's the, like I said, it's a public repo. You can go get it and you can use it, and I would encourage you to use it. I thought a lot about making that an NPM lib, and if somebody wants to, they can. But the thing is, this is not that much code. It's not too terribly complicated, and I really think it's more valuable as a teaching tool, because I want you guys to write this yourself. And like I said, if you want to use something like this, it's a pattern, right? If you want to use this, this is one of the reasons why I put in so many comments and stuff like that, because I want you to use this pattern and then go in and put in whatever you want. It doesn't have to be dynamic forms. It could be pop-ups. It could be, anything else. If you have questions about this, then I would love for you to come and talk to me about it, because I think this code is really cool and I like to nerd out about it. And also you can come on Angular Nation. So angularnation.net is, I'm just turning off my screen share there. And Daniel and Mark, if you want to come back in, angularnation.net is a site for the Angular community, and it's free. So all you need is an email address, and you can go ask questions like that. And also this little demo that I showed you, I started out using this I wrote this for a client a couple years ago, and then I implemented it for another client. This is actually just one small section of my Angular Architects training. So I'm running Angular Architect training right now, and we have a 4-week course. Once a week, we have content sessions, and then we actually have office hours, which is the coolest part of the course, is when you come in and tell me what you're working on and ask me questions about your app. So you can find me on angularnation.net. And this GitHub, Daniel, I'm putting a link in the to that GitHub repo so that they can go get it and use it. And ask me questions if you have questions.
I have to admit that I'm gonna be the first one jumping on the repo, because currently I'm on a project and I had to do a very similar thing. We have our requirement was that basically they wanted to allow customers to select when a field was optional, when a field was had mean, max length, etc. from the backend and through an administrative tool. And I had to do something very similar. I'm really interested to see how you did it. So thank you for sharing this. Thank you for your time. And thank you again, Mark, for all the coolness and all the energy. I hope to see you both in more events. And thank you, everyone, joining us. Remember that we have also React events, Vue events, GraphQL events. Whatever you want to learn, share it with us. I mean, we're trying to do as much content as you want, as we can about modern JavaScript frameworks and stuff like that. So if you want to give a talk, you can always reach out. We're always looking for people, encouraging new people too. So have a nice day, have an awesome week, and I hope to see all of you in a new session in the future. Bye, all.